Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It. This is your host, Taylor, and I'm very excited to discuss all the topics we're going to discuss in today's episode. But first, I want to give a reminder that if you haven't listened to the previous episode, we discussed the state of politics both within the U.S. and Canada. We discussed white privilege, white fragility, and how those are related to the systems that work within both of our societies. Very great episode. Highly enjoyed it. And today we're going to get a bit back into the sexual health world. I was so excited to record with this guest. This episode was also recorded in Toronto, and it's going to be featuring Dr. Stephen DeWitt, who is just honestly such a freaking joy. He's a board-certified sexologist. He holds a Master of Public Health in Human Sexuality and a Doctorate of Human Sexuality. He actually started off as a sexual health counselor at Toronto's Hassle-Free Clinic, and now he travels both nationally and internationally speaking about sexual empowerment. And as a sexual educator, therapist, and consultant, he's committed to helping people live a sexually empowered life free of guilt and shame and fear, and actually help them have relationships that work. And he actually helps me a bit with that through this episode, and hopefully will also help all of you listening. I will say I share something a bit personal. That was definitely a first for me, a first sexual experience that I had. And just please remember as we go into all of these episodes that we are putting on our empathy hats and taking our judgment pants off, or taking off our judgment hats. We can keep our pants on unless you've consented to taking them off. But with all of that said, welcome to episode 104. We will be discussing healthy sexual communication, boundaries, and exploring new territory both with yourself and with your partner. So with all of that said, let's talk about it. All right. So welcome, Stephen, to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm excited.
Yes. Honestly, this is I've been, not to, shit on my other guests, but
I'm the best. It's okay. No. We don't want to start any.
But I have been super, super looking forward to this episode, mainly just because I love talking sex things. Mm-hmm. Also, you just have fantastic energy. When we spoke on the phone, I was like, definitely want to get together with him when I get to Toronto. So, awesome. Yes, amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
So you do some amazing work, and I want to start off just kind of sharing with our listeners some of the work you do. And so maybe just a brief history, a little bit of what got you into this kind of work.
Boy, yeah. Okay. That's
yeah.
So I'll give you the three, because that's a really great question. A lot of people ask that. So three things that impacted me and shaped kind of who I am today. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I grew up Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
So growing up and being like, sex is bad and wrong, and not only that, but even if you think about sex, it's just as bad as having sex. Yeah. So I'd go to church and be like, okay, I'm not gonna. I'm just waiting for marriage, and then I'm not even gonna think about sex. And then I'd go outside, and there'd be movies and videos and magazines and everything that's like sex, and I'm like, don't think about that. And of course I'm thinking about that. So I just grew up in like, why is this like this? This dichotomy that I didn't quite understand at a really young age.
Yeah.
And then growing up, I played outside with like the neighborhood kids as one did in my time. And
those kids don't do that these days.
Well, it's different these days.
Yes.
And so what had happened was there was a girl that I was friends with, and she was 2 years older than me, and she was sexually abused from the age of 7 to 13.
Okay.
And I found this out when I was in grade 9. And it hit me really hard.
Yeah.
I found out at school. I started crying at school. I went home, talked to my mom about it, and was really, really upset. And the girl actually came over and talked to me. Mm-hmm. And what was there for me is like, I wanted to do something. I wanted to prevent that. Like, that shouldn't happen on my watch.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I'm a 7-year-old telling a 5-year-old, I can't do anything. But there was something there for me that was like, this shouldn't happen, and if I can do something about it, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
The third thing was my parents were very proud of me. Mm-hmm. I worked as a topless male waiter at a bar called the Wild Coyote in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I was in my last year of university. And so from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock, it was women only. So, and male strippers. And in Vancouver, they go full Monty.
Yeah.
And I was a topless male waiter. And I remember the host, a guy by the name of AJ, was like, Steven, you just got to stand there, hold the drinks, and keep talking. And they're going to buy drinks to shut you up or buy drinks because you're cute. And I'm like, I can do that all day. But what that really gave me a witness to was raw female sexuality.
Yeah.
Like women just owning their voice, just being expressive. And I would sit there, and at that time in my life, I wasn't sexual at all. I think I had one girlfriend at that time. And I was just like sitting there and being like, Toto, we ain't in Kansas anymore. Like how many young men have a window into like 200-300 women just expressing themselves and owning that? And there was no other space. And I would argue there isn't another space for women to actually own their voice. And for me, it was like all those three things led me to like just be really curious about sex. So I started reading about sex as much as I can and trying to figure out as much as I could. So those were the three kind of originating incidents that led me on the path that I'm today taking. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, all of that makes a lot of sense. And your first point around growing up Catholic, I have received, this wasn't necessarily on my idea, on my list to discuss, but this is also just why I love podcasting. It's like, we'll see wherever it goes.
You bet.
But people actually messaged me asking a lot about masturbation growing up Catholic and religious and Christian and just not knowing, like feeling a lot of that guilt and a lot of that shame around masturbating and like asking if I grew up that way and if I had any experience with that, which I don't. I didn't grow up really with any kind of religion. But I'm curious if that was something you worked through personally or if you've like done work helping people move through that guilt and shame of masturbation because of religion.
So yes and no.
Yeah.
So I grew up. So my dad was Roman Catholic and my mom was Ukrainian Greek Orthodox. My mom was also a nurse and my mom also worked for Planned Parenthood back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? In the 70s. And so my mom we'd talk about sex and it's normal and it's healthy. And there's a great story I tell about my mom. So when I first, this may be TMI.
It's never TMI. Okay, it's never TMI on this pod.
You're getting it raw and real with Dr. DeWitt. So when I was young and I first started masturbating, I masturbated a lot.
Yeah.
To the point where I would have sores on my penis.
Yes. I've heard this only in like stand-ups about like how guys like jerk off until they bleed. And I'm like, that's a thing.
So it wasn't quite bleeding, but there were sores. So again, and I was in just out of elementary school going into high school. So we had sex education and a lot of sex education at that time, and it's changing now in different parts of the world, is fear-based. Yeah. STIs, you're going to get pregnant. Oh, don't do it. Blah, 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 blah. Yep. So I'm like, I have an STI. So I'm mortified. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know.
But only through masturbating.
Well, so I didn't know that, but here, let's go there. So I'm like, what do I have to do? So I'm like, I have an STI. So I'm like, I got to talk to my mom about this. So I'm like, I got to talk to my mom about this. So I'm like, how embarrassing. I'm like 11 years old and I got to like, I still was dying. So I go and I talk to my mom and, my mom's a nurse, takes a look at it. She's like, Steven, don't worry about it. You're fine. It's nothing. So I'm like, okay. So I go back up to my room and then it hits me, Taylor. I'm like, oh, it's you masturbating. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want my mom to think I have an STI. So I'm like, I now have to go tell my mom. And so again,
you've been masturbating
mortification. So I go down and I tell my mom, I'm like, this is what it is. And my mom told me this great story that stuck with me till this day. She said, Steven, she's like, there was this great army general and he was about to go to war. And he had 10,000 of his troops in front of him. And he said, how many of you men don't masturbate? And there was maybe like 20 or 30 men who put up their hand. And he said, you're fired. You're liars. I don't want to go to war with you.
Yeah.
And so that was the story my mom told me, which meant like, everybody does it. It's okay. It's natural and it's healthy. So that's an interesting story that I got, which was really positive, and I share that story, even though it's a little bit embarrassing. But I have worked, when I did my clinical placement here in Toronto at the Hassle-Free Clinic, a wonderful place to work, I had all people from all sorts of all walks of life come in and dealing with all sorts of stuff. And the people that had the biggest challenges were the people that came from that highly religious background where culturally there's a lot of sex negativity and a lot of shame and a lot of fear. So we'd have people who, what we refer to as high anxiety, low risk. So they're freaking out about stuff that they don't need to freak out about. So being patient and working through with people of their shame and where that came from, and just basic education about them. You know, and this is something that I believe in. The most important sexual relationship you ever have is the one you have with yourself, right? And can be masturbation, but how you think about yourself sexually, what works for you sexually, how do you honor yourself sexually?
Absolutely.
So that's a bit about my journey, and then working with other people through theirs.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I don't think that's TMI. I'm sure there's a male listener out there that's like, that makes me feel less alone.
Yeah.
And there was recently a episode of The Daily Show where Mike, I forget his last name, but they do these little bits, and they were with white nationalists, or with a psychiatrist and psychologist talking about white nationalists, that there's been some research done that is showing that they discourage masturbation within their groups, and that is leading potentially to a lot of the anger and aggression, and just like that all these young men are like abstaining from masturbation, yet they have all this pent up energy, and they're using all of that to fuel their movement. And it was a very interesting segment. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned early on in my education was when you battle yourself, you always lose. So and sex is a natural expression of who we are. It's a right that we have as human beings. And when we try and suppress that, it comes out in weird ways, because it will always come out. So a lot of the work that I do with couples and with individuals is having them own and step into who they are, and working through that shame or that fear or that guilt, so they can be fully self-expressed inside of that. You know, there's lots of different studies that have shown that, again, if you suppress this or if you hide who you are, you're going to lose that battle. It's going to come out in ways, and when you're trying to suppress it, it usually comes out in unhealthy ways, rather than fully stepping in and just like owning it and being like, this is who I am. This is how I like to rock out. How do I connect with a partner or partners who are on the same page and same level that I am, so I can, have that type of connection and create something really amazing with my partner?
Definitely. All right, I want to take a short break right here just to share a new sponsor of the podcast that I'm really excited about, because whenever I am getting ready to go see clients, sometimes I feel like I have this stress of like, okay, do I dress, stylish and professional, or like, do I want to be comfortable, but then am I not being professional? There's this whole thought process that occurs. But now, thanks to Beta Brand's dress pant yoga pants, I don't have to deal with this conflict anymore. They create very stylish, comfortable, professional attire so that you don't have to pick just one. With Beta Brand, you never have to sacrifice comfort or function for style. And it's honestly, they have very, very cute colors. My pants that I got are like a very cute, like a rustic orange, I guess is the best way to describe it. They have so many different styles, like boot cut, straight leg, skinny, cropped. They even have a pair with 8 pockets. I mean, you could really be going like from a yoga class into work, going to home to cook dinner, going back to the office, like anywhere your day takes you. Beta Brand's pants just really kind of are flexible and fit you into like any environment. And right now, our lovely listeners can get 20% off their first order when they go to betabrand.com/talk. That's 20% off your first order at betabrand.com/talk. Millions of women agree that these are the most comfortable pants you'll ever wear to work. And I co-sign this. So again, make sure to check out Beta Brand and go to betabrand.com/talk for 20% off. And I hope that helps you all maintain both your professionalism and your comfortability, because we should not have to sacrifice our comfort for our professionalism. And with all that said, we can get back to the show. Just to transition a little bit here into how to create something great with your partner. A lot of the work that you do is helping people to reclaim their sexuality and get better in touch with their own sexuality and with their sexual desires. And I get a lot of questions from listeners and people on Instagram about how to communicate, how to even talk about sex. And I'm someone that's super comfortable to talk about sex and talk about it almost every day. Literally, my Lyft driver from the airport into Toronto and we were talking about, he was actually sharing about some of the training now that Lyft is offering people about how to communicate in cars and whatnot because of these things that are happening with Uber and sexual assaults and all this, and how they're not even supposed to say the word sex. And he made a comment of, in my 10,000 rides that I've had, I think not one person has ever mentioned sex, let alone said it as many times as you have. So I'd say you're quite comfortable talking about it.
You get a gold star.
I was like, I'm comfortable talking about it. But not everyone is. And a lot of people don't actually have even the skills or the tools to know how to have some of these conversations around sex before having sex or even, having sex with a long-term partner, but not knowing how to communicate what they actually want. And so I feel like you got a lot to say on this topic. So
yes, I do. How much time do we have left?
Yes. I'm going to let you take it away on some communication skills that you work with people on to be able to communicate that.
Yeah. So I first like to start off of why we're not good at communicating about sex.
Yeah.
Right? So first of all, we've never been taught how.
Yes.
Which is a big missing because when I work with couples, they'll go through hell and back. They'll go through death of parents, illnesses, sometimes death of kids, job loss, all this stuff. And they'll communicate and they'll connect. But if they got to talk about sex and what's not working or what they want to change, it's like,
Yep.
Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So we've never actually been taught how to have real, mature, productive, constructive, and creative conversations around sex.
Yeah.
We know we've been taught we can as men, it's like, we can joke, it's break it out, it's just like locker room talk, competition.
Yeah.
Women talk on a different level about, sex and what they love. And there's that whole world. But then how do we, and again, if we look at a heterosexual couple, how do we communicate as men and women? So the first part is we've never been taught.
Yeah.
Second, we've grown up in what I call a sex negative society. So sex is good if it looks like this.
If it's sexualized.
Yes.
As well.
Yes. Right? So if sex is between a man and a woman, they're in love, they're married, and ideally for the purposes of baby making, then sex is great, right? That's what my great grandma would like, that's the way that it's supposed to be. Now, anything from that point is less than or bad or wrong. And so there's this world we have to fit into this box. And if I don't fit into this box, or if I have to talk about this, this is going to be weird. Yeah. The other thing is we've grown up, generally speaking, again in North America, in this fairy tale kind of world of this is what it's supposed to be.
Prince Charming, come save me.
Right? Sweep me off my feet, make passionate love to me, and multiple orgasms, right? The reality is a lot of the time, because I like to say we all have a unique sexual fingerprint. Yeah. We got to figure out what works for us and what works for our partner. Because you're reading off a script that has been written by your experiences, by your relationships, by your family, maybe by your religion, by your trauma. And I'm coming with all that same stuff. But you're reading off a different script than I'm reading off. And then we're like, okay, we're going to mash our bodies together and hopefully it's going to be amazing. Yeah,
it's a love map.
Right?
The Gottmans talk about love maps.
Totally. And then if it's not, we're like, sorry, Taylor, not going to work. Yeah. And I'm talking to my buddies. I'm like, sex with Taylor and Nolan, not good. Not good. It's not going to work. Yeah. And then we step away from that. And where, I work with clients and can work with clients, even if that's at the beginning of the relationship or, in the middle or maybe sometimes at the end and they're trying to save it, is how do we be responsible for our scripts, all the stuff that has shaped and created who we are now, come to terms with that and own that, and then be able to share and express that with our partner, and then have the space open up for them to share as well. Yeah. So it's about taking away a lot of the stuff that gets in the way of two people who love each other. Yeah. So I believe if everything can be solved through communication, and people say, oh, Stephen, is sex the most important thing in a relationship? I'm like, no, it's not. But it is a symptom of what's going on in the relationship. So if there's a lot of beef between you and I, or resentment, or I didn't take out the garbage or walk the dog, or like I saw stuff on your phone just now going off and I'm like, Taylor, who's Brad? What's going on with that? Right? And that's in the back of my head. Then, there's all this stuff that comes between us.
Absolutely.
And what's beautiful is when I work with clients, being able to pull all that stuff out of the way, the most natural thing then is for them to like reach out and show their love and their connection through the physicality of it. Yeah. So I'm getting a little bit away. I'm going to go back to the communication part. Yeah. So two things in my research when I was doing my doctorate, and I focused a lot on communication that prevents people from actually connecting and actually prevents your partner from actually hearing what you're saying. Yeah. Is two things. One, they don't know where you're coming from. So, I can think of times when I had a partner sharing with me, or maybe when I was sharing with a partner and I didn't set them up. So I brought something up and they're like, oh my goodness, does he not love me anymore? Is he cheating on me? Is my butt too small? Is is the sex what am I like? What's going on? Like your mind goes a bunch of different places. Because again, we've grown up in that sex negative society. So when something other than, oh my God, Taylor, you are a sex goddess. Anything other than that, or heaven forbid, something that's not working or that you want to change, most people will be triggered and spin off into a whole bunch of different places. Yeah,
they think it's maybe something with them. Exactly. They take it personally, usually because they're not hearing from you why that's the case, and they're also perhaps already dealing with their own insecurities around sex, and are then feeling like you're bringing this up because you've done something wrong.
100%. So that's the first thing that gets in people's way, and the second part that leaves the person that you're sharing with at a loss for words is exactly that, a loss for words. So usually when people are sharing, you got so much stuff going on for them, they just kind of blurt it out. And then your partner's sitting there like all the stuff, like, what do we do? Like, how do we do this? So I created, it's called the LIDA technique, and I'll share with you the 4 steps to it, but you make it a co-creative process. You invite your partner in, you want their thoughts, their feedback. So now it's 2 people talking about something rather than someone blurting out something to the other person and hoping that they're going to know exactly where they're coming from and why they're bringing it up and be open to like creating a solution, where most people shut down. And I can look at myself where in the past, before I did a lot of the work myself, I would do that, or sharing with a partner and have her shut down. Yeah. So is it okay if I share the LIDA technique? Yeah. So LIDA is an acronym. So LITA. So L is you want to share what you like or love about the person in the relationship.
Yes, definitely.
The I is you want to share what's important to you about the person in the relationship. Said another way is like, what are you committed to for the future? So these first 2 steps allow that person to like relax into, oh, I know where Taylor's coming from now. And I'm now more open and receptive to the T, which is the next part, which is the topic.
Yeah. Well, the first 2 also provide an opportunity for connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then you bring up the topic because the person's like, oh, okay, I feel a lot better now. You bring up the topic, and then the A is the last part, and it's A squared. So there's 2 parts of it. First of all, you want to ask if they're open to having the conversation right now. And guess what? They may not be. They may not be. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes people come to you and they're like, hey, Taylor, is it, can we have a conversation right now? And you're like, no, because you're busy doing something, and they keep talking over you, and you want to punch them in the throat. Right? So we want to respect our partner. They may not be in that space to have that conversation. They may have gotten in a fight with their mom, the dog, whatever. They got a lot of stuff going on. And that's fine. If they say no, just say, great, when would be a good time? Yes. Whether that's the next day or a week or whatever it is. Perfect. You set that up. And then you say, great, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. I want to know what you think about this. And so that brings us into this now co-creative space where it's like, oh, first of all, I feel safe to have this conversation. And you want to hear where I'm coming from in this. This is now a partnership between like you and I sitting shoulder to shoulder rather than apart being like, oh yeah, like this is wrong. And like there's something
you're doing this.
Exactly. So that's a technique that a lot of people really enjoy. And the cool thing about the LIDA technique, you don't always have to do it with a partner talking about sex. If you want to talk to colleagues or friends or family, it's any awkward or uncomfortable conversation this makes things go so much smoother. I was doing a workshop here in Toronto, and there was this guy, I never forget, his name was Omar. He gave me permission to use his name. And he's sitting in the front row. He's one of those people, when you speak, they're like, oh my goodness, they're like eating everything up. They're like taking notes. They're like, so he comes up after me and he's like, Dr. DeWitt, that was amazing. I'm like, just call me Steven. And he says, the Lita technique, I love that. I'm going to use that. So I was like, great, good for you. High five. Shake his hand, off his way. The next day I'm in my office and bing, I get this email. So I look at my email and it's Omar. And he writes, oh my goodness, Steven, I used the Lita technique with my boss. It was amazing. And I email him back and I'm like, good for you. Congratulations. Yeah. Send it off. And then bing, I get an email from him and he's like, oh my God, Steven, I'm not having sex with my boss. And I was like, nope. I'm like, Omar, it's cool, man. Like, use it wherever you got to use it. You're not banging your boss.
Yes.
We're cool.
Yes. It's communication.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And so much of, and I always say, the most important part of having a great sex life is through communication.
100%.
And communication with two people. First and foremost, yourself. So how you think about sex.
Yeah.
And secondly, the communication between you and your partner. Yeah. And so a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, I want to have better communication with myself. And I'm always like, okay, great. Like, let's talk about how you communicate with yourself first. What are the stories? What are the fears? What are the concerns? All that other kind of stuff that's spinning in your head that shows up between you and your partner, and you make it about your partner. And so once you can start taking responsibility and ownership for that, and then your partner sees you taking ownership and responsibility for that, and they're like, oh shit, something's different about Taylor.
Yeah.
She's doing something differently. Oh, now I'm going to step up because she's not doing what she usually does. That gets us, down that crappy argument fighting place. Oh, I'm going to step up. I'm going to do something different. And then you notice, oh, Steven's doing something different. I'm going to, and so it's like this step up towards where people want to be in their relationships. And helping people navigate that and explore that and express that is what lights me up if I'm doing that, one-on-one with a couple, or if I'm speaking in front of a large audience or whatever, getting people to be like, oh, I can actually do that. I can see now a path, because so many people are so stuck and so frustrated. They don't know what to do or how to do it.
Super.
Yeah.
And one of the things that some people want to do when they are stuck is introduce toys.
Yes.
And okay, at the beginning of the episode, I said I was super excited for this.
Yes.
And I'm going to be honest and share with listeners now why I'm actually super excited. Okay. And that's because I got a text from Steven yesterday that he was coming back from the airport and got stuck at TSA because he had Winston with him. And for those of you that are seeing the little clip on Instagram or whatever to see what Winston looks like, this is Winston. But for those of you that are not watching the video, Steven, you want to share a little bit about Winston for us?
So Winston is an 18-inch, silicone rubber combination. It's a dildo.
It's a huge, massive dildo. And I also just want to point out, we are in a co-working space currently, in an office that has glass big
So I'm going
to
hold this up right now like this and like put it over Taylor's head like this. I'm like, oh, like that's good. Okay.
And so far, no one has paid attention, but I'm also very curious to see when someone walks by and realizes we have like an 18-inch dildo sitting on the table.
Yeah. So Winston has been with me for a while, and why I have him, first of all, he's never been used, so it's all for prop and stunts. Yes. But it's about some of the myths that we're told as men. Like who we have to be sexually, right?
Oh, yes.
So we have to have the biggest penis. We're going to have sex for the longest period of time. We're always ready for sex, and we always please our partners. Like we're this sex robot that we're conditioned to do. Yeah. The reality is we're not that. So I bring Winston when I'm talking primarily to, groups of men or boys, and talking about the male myths about who we are as sexual beings. Now, the funny part is I brought Winston once to a school that I was speaking to, and it was 18-year-old boys. So I pull out Winston, and they start laughing. But the laughter was like a little bit more intense than I'm used to. So I was like, whatever, maybe I'm really funny today, right? I got an ego. I'm like, yeah, I'm rocking this out. Yeah. So anyways, we finish, there's like, I don't know, like 200-300. And then the principal and the teacher come to me and they're like, Steven, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was really, really great. But we have a teacher here by the name of Winston.
Oh,
and I was like,
no.
Oh, damn. So now I'm always really careful to be like, is there a teacher or a CEO or someone named Winston? And then I will change his name.
Yes.
But yeah, so I got pulled aside because this was in my carry-on, and so my bag got inspected. So what I did, there's these two lovely like older women on either side of me, and I'm like, oh, how do I do this? So the guy's really great. He comes up, and I was like, before you open my bag, and his eyes like open up. He's like, what is this guy gonna say? I'm like, I'm a sex educator, and so inside are some interesting things. And he just looks at me, and he's like, oh, and he's like, we can see it on the screen. He's like, it's huge. I'm like, yeah, his name's Winston. And he's like, with something that big, you got to have a name for it. And I'm like, yep.
Yes. I have names for all my toys.
Yeah.
I name all of them.
Yeah.
And I take it couples aren't necessarily introducing a Winston into their
some couples maybe
sex life. Some perhaps.
Yeah. It's not a starter toy.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, no one's starting off with Winston.
Yeah.
But for couples that do want to start off introducing some toys, I have my own kind of thoughts on this, but I would love to hear from you some tips that you help give people.
So I'm going to step back a little bit from that question and just talk more broadly about how people introduce something new into their sex life. Generally, it could be toys, it could be something else. So definitely. I have an acronym. I'm all about the acronyms.
Yeah,
it's easy
I'm all
for
about
people
it.
To learn. So it's called SWAT-B. So SWATB. So before you start using something new or connecting with a partner for the first time or introducing anything into your sex life, so S stands for safe words. So have a safe word, one for stop and one for slow down. Now, this could be anything that is like that you would not say in a sexual space. So like mine
was blueberry.
Sure, blueberry, like taxi, pineapple, ham hocks, like whatever you want. So have safe words that can let your partner know where you're at, and both people have safe words. So the W is well-being. So where is your partner at? Where are you at? Yeah. And there's two parts. So you look at the physicality of it. Did you pull a muscle at the gym? Did you burn your wrist curling your hair or straightening your hair? And emotionally, where are you at? Are you depressed? Are you sad? Are you excited? Are you stressed? Are you tired? What's going on?
Well-being, your like emotional relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Like where your confidence is at.
Because you want to have that connection with your partner because, they're all super jazzed up and we're going to bust out Winston and you're like, I just got some bad news at school or at work or whatever.
Yeah.
So I like to say we have sex for a reason, a season, an emotion, a nighttime, or a lifetime.
Oh, you're not only with the acronyms, but with the rhymes.
Freestyle and straight off the dome.
Yes.
So it's looking at sex as a buffet. So what is going to honor myself and what is going to honor me at this time? And is introducing something new, is introducing a toy, is introducing something going to honor where I'm at right now?
Yes, and looking at sex as a buffet as opposed to like baseball game.
Yes.
You ain't got no sex toys on the plates. There's no introducing new things on the baseball diamond.
Yeah, and we get caught in a rut.
Yeah.
And the only, difference between a rut and a grave is the depth of the hole. Right? So this is and listen, I've been there, maybe you've been there, but like you think about your partner or past partners or maybe future partners, and it's like, oh, sex is going to start like this. It's going to follow this thing.
Yeah.
So how do we interrupt that and do that differently? The A in SWAT-B stands for aftercare. What do you need afterwards to reconnect? When you're connecting with a partner for the first time or trying something new, you're stepping outside and exploring new things that different things may come up for you. So afterwards, what do you want to do to recalibrate, reconnect, so then you can continue on your day or your night from there?
Yeah.
The T is triggers. What are the things that are going to take you out of a sexual headspace? It could be something someone says, or it could be a way you're touched, or anything along those lines. So share that with your partner so you can have that really great, amazing experience together. And the B, what are your boundaries around this?
Oh, yes.
So what are your hard boundaries, which is like, hell no, Taylor, not in my lifetime. And then there's going to be soft boundaries. And so that's like, maybe if we're celebrating something or if we're on vacation or something like that. And the only times soft boundaries are explored is after a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share a little bit here just around boundaries.
Sure.
I used to have a lot of boundaries sexually. And it was like right before I went on the show about like 3 years ago that I kind of explored letting some of those down and, you know, definitely went outside my comfort zone.
Yep.
And one of them that I still have had, which I've shared in a previous episode of the podcast with Dr. Lauren Vogel Mercy, was coming inside me. Coming inside my vagina is not an option. I'm not on the pill right now anyway, so like why someone would want to try to do that, don't know. But
because it feels so good.
Yeah, right? Because it helps me connect with you. Yeah, I've heard that. But the one that this came up in a past relationship, I've never had someone fully come in my mouth from a blowjob. That I've always pulled it out. That like I want to see it out, and like I've never I've tasted the cum, right? But it's never been like a full out like in my mouth and like I'm swallowing a whole load. Like that just has always seemed outside of my comfort zone, and it's something I usually communicate ahead of time of like, hey, just so you know, like don't come in my mouth. And I explored that sexual boundary.
And how was it?
Just last night.
Amazing. High five.
And
First of all, did it go well? Let me not give you a high five. Okay, good.
No, it did. It went really well, actually.
Awesome.
And I have to say, I mean, at first I didn't, like I knew he was about to come, right? And I didn't have that usual instinct that I usually do of like, okay, I'm going to like pull it out. Like, and usually that's like a fear, right? That I'm like, oh, like it's going to shoot in the back of my throat and I'm going to like choke and die. And like a little irrational, but also some truth there.
Sure.
And I remember I like did a poll with like a bunch of my girlfriends, like, okay, like, do you let them fully come in your mouth? Like, do you like, you know, whether you swallow or you spit, like, do you actually take a whole load in your mouth every time you give a blowjob?
Yeah.
And it was mixed. But I definitely felt safe in the interaction, and it didn't. I didn't have that fear, that knee-jerk reaction that came up. But one thing I super appreciated, and I think part of why I didn't even realize it was fully happening at the start, was that his cum like didn't taste like anything. Like it tasted very good. And in the past, I've like been with guys, and right in the cum, it tastes like funky,
Not
and I'm
so
like,
good.
it's not like I fully want that in my mouth, let alone like just the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think a huge part of that has to do with diet. This man doesn't drink and is also vegan. And I'm like, wow, that was fantastic, actually. I was like,
You're now vegan with your men.
But it was actually very good. And I didn't think I was going to share this, but I think this is like an important real life sex experience to share that, as it happened, it was in my mouth, and then like the end, I didn't fully realize. And so once I realized that all of this is in my mouth now, I had still continued to kind of give him a blowjob a little bit. And so some of it was like coming out. And then I was like, yeah, this is 100% like, whoa. Like it just hit me. I was like, I just had a full thing in my mouth. And then I started laughing, and he was like slightly confused of like, why are you laughing? I just started laughing, and I like explained, you know, with it like kind of in my mouth, and I was like, I haven't done it before. and he had no idea what I was talking about. And so I like communicated again, you know, and it was very sweet. Actually, like, do you want me to get you a cup? And like he went like got me a cup, and I like spit out the rest of it in a cup. And I was like, I definitely could have swallowed it, but I just now have made it so awkward and like got in my head, because now I realize it's just sitting in my mouth, and it would have been like too much of a moment to be like, okay, now I'm going to swallow all of it. But I will say from that experience, it did go very well. And I was like, oh yeah, like you could do that again. And I think I would actually like enjoy that. And yeah, stepping outside of boundaries, I think you can be surprised sometimes. And I don't think it ever, not that I'm like in a super serious thing with this person, right? But I think just the dynamic that is there, that feeling of safety, that feeling of appreciation, that feeling of respect, that feeling of trust, all of those things were super present to make me not have that kind of like fearful. And I think this is really important too when it comes to like giving oral, that you feel empowered in that.
Yes.
And like, I think in most times that I'm giving a blowjob is to please my partner and isn't necessarily like, I'm really enjoying this. There are times that I super enjoy it.
Yeah.
And last night was one of them.
Yeah.
But to where I was just fully in it and was like, I'm really enjoying this, that it didn't feel as much of like, oh, like he's just gonna like try to come like all in my mouth and I'm gonna be like, okay, now I have to deal with this.
Yes.
So this is a very different kind of dynamic that I think allowed me to step outside my boundary.
Yeah, and it's so, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing. I acknowledge you for taking the risk and just
Yeah.
putting it out there. Rock on, that's how we do.
Yep.
And so there's so many really great things about that. One of them is how you felt to have you be comfortable in that moment. You felt safe, respected, appreciated, maybe loved, like he, was turned on by you, all these wonderful things that are really great.
I felt very proud of myself. I was like, I'm doing a good job.
Yes. And like to be empowered and to be comfortable. So a lot of when I work with people, and this is specifically men, and they want to have a more vibrant and alive sex life, or even with their partner, I'm like, think about what's going to make your partner comfortable. If you can get your partner comfortable, and my mom used to say, and still does, 2 heads are better than 1. So it's rather than me being like the man and playing that scripted role of being the sexual aggressor and, let's do this, and I want to come in your mouth, and you're like, no, I kind of do it because I want to please you and all this other kind of stuff. And be like, hey, Taylor, what makes you comfortable? What do you want to explore?
Yeah.
What turns you on? What gets you wet? Where your fan is, and just a conversation inside of that can get things so much farther. A lot of women come to me and they're like, "Oh, I can't orgasm with my partner, or can't orgasm with a man, but I can orgasm by myself when I'm using toys."
Yes.
Why is that? Or they're on this
100%.
hunt to like, "Oh, I want to find a guy to make you orgasm. I want to find a guy to make myself come."
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, listen, nobody gives you an orgasm. You share your orgasm with your partner.
Ooh, yes.
I'm like, if orgasms would be given out for Christmas, I would wrap up orgasms for everybody and like, you get an orgasm, you get an orgasm, you get an orgasm.
Yes.
And so what I ask, and again, this is specifically around women, is what do you have, or what's present when you're by yourself that's missing when you're with a partner? So often it is a lot of what you just said. Safety, respect, security, desire, control, power. Yeah. All of those things. So when I work with women about this, it's like, oh yeah, I don't have those things. I'm worried about that, or I can't trust them, or this is what's going on in my head, or I'm feeling insecure about this, or we haven't had real communication about maybe what our relationship is and maybe what it isn't. We haven't talked about boundaries, so I don't know if he's gonna shoot his load in my mouth, and then I'm gonna like have to like half gargle, talk to him, run to the bathroom, spit it out, and then
feel shame that you're like not like just like swallowing.
Yeah, like how come I'm not a porn star? I should totally do that. That's so yummy.
Yeah.
When it tastes not so yummy as it can at times.
Yeah, it can at times. And that's what I'm like, do you not get? Like, sometimes people don't want to do that because, like, sometimes that doesn't taste good. And, like, if I didn't taste good, I don't think you'd enjoy that. And I don't want you to do something to me because you think it's going to please me when it's not enjoyable for you.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to be enjoyable for you. And I think that's where I was, like, pleasantly surprised that I was like, I didn't think I was capable of doing that, but I did it, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah, right? When you can explore, and that's where the real magic happens. When you get out on those skinny branches and, like, try something new and with a partner that you feel safe and respected and all those wonderful things, then it's like, what other things have I shut down and dropped the guillotine on and being like, no, never, that's bad, that's wrong, that's gross, or I tried it with Brad, I think was the guy I texted you, but now I'm open to, Paul or Sandeep or whoever it is, and, be like, oh, that's cool, what else can I explore, and what kind of conversations do I need to have with this partner of mine? One of the things that I heard you say, and I don't want to step over it, is you're like, afterwards, it was kind of like too awkward to like explain things, or like I'm now going to swallow, and all those other kind of things. So after that moment, I'm guessing, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, you may have felt like all these different things and all these emotions and like feeling proud, but like, oh, I could have done that better. Or if I swallowed it right away, it would have been all this other kind of stuff. And so I promise you, and I know if you had a conversation, you're lying there He's lying there. You have all this stuff going on in your brain.
In my mouth.
Yeah, in your mouth. And he's lying there being like, what's going on? And so whenever, this is what I tell people, whenever you're like lying in bed being like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on or what's happening here, or is this, have a conversation.
Yes.
And just be like, hey, this may sound weird, but can I just bring something up and share something with you? Like, that was a first for me. I feel kind of weird about it. Was that cool for you? Because I figure, like, just get, because then it's like.
And I did.
Yeah.
I cannot not talk about something if it's awkward and I'm like right there.
That's where the richness is.
Exactly. And he very much like, he turned towards me. Like he's a very like
That's
nice,
awesome.
Kind person. And so he's very sweet in that way. And it wasn't like what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, like, what's up? Like, why are you laughing? Like, he was kind of laughing because I was laughing. But then I did talk through it, and I did have a lot of feelings. I did feel like proud of myself and excited, and I didn't necessarily feel like I asked him. He has a partner that he sees occasionally. And I asked, like, oh, like, does that partner, like, do they usually just like do it? Like, is that like what you're used to? And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, yeah, like, I think like that is kind of common, but I just haven't. And I kind of liked it.
So it's awesome that you liked it.
Yeah.
And again, I want to go back to you comparing yourself to someone else.
Yeah, well, I like to get like a gauge because I want to know what my partner is used to.
Yes.
So I was like, yeah, I guess that maybe that would have been different for you. Like, granted, this was not the first time I gave him a blowjob.
Yeah.
But the other times it led to sex or other things, and it was very clear that it was not a blowjob for just the specific blowjob.
Yeah.
But I do. The only reason I feel I ask and I inquire and I'm curious what other women do is to know if that's actually something that's like quote unquote normal, right? Or if it's something that is perpetuated and over sexualized by porn.
Okay. So a couple things on that note.
Yes.
So there is no normal when it comes to sex.
Yeah. Quote unquote.
There is what is statistically normative. So if you look at a bell curve, the majority of people express themselves sexually with that partner. If you're like way on the edges of it and you're like 1% of the population is down with how you like to get down, that's 75 million people on the planet. Yeah. So what I would invite you to look at is get in communication with your partner about what he likes and what works for him rather than what he does with other women. Because when you start doing that, it narrows down what's possible between you creating something. So maybe he does something. I've talked to people and they do something with their partner and they don't actually like doing it, but they do it because this is what I have to do.
Yes.
Versus like, what do you really like? How do you like blowjobs? Do you want me to dress up like a sailor and bark like a dog?
Yeah.
And then perform oral sex on you? Like, what is it that you want? And then for you, it's like you stepping into and owning. It doesn't matter. I don't care if every other woman on the planet takes loads in her mouth and Taylor Nolan is like, no, that's not my jam. It's still what works for you and what honors you.
Yes.
Now, coming from a researcher and a podcaster and, someone who like wants to be connected with other people, sure, that's great information to have.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing in the unsaid is a little bit about like, what is he, I want to please him, or what do other people do and I want to be the best versus what I'd invite you and every other listener to be like, I'm going to be the best Taylor Nolan in the sexual realm. I'm going to be the best Stephen DeWitt in the sexual realm. That means all the things I'm comfortable with and not comfortable with. And now I'm going to create something with you that maybe you've never done before or I've never done before.
Yeah.
But now it's this like rich kind of cool thing where we can explore and play and connect and have all that awesome juiciness that we want.
All the juiciness.
Do you know it?
Yeah. No, I think I like that point. I think I do have those conversations about like, what do you like? When it comes to that boundary that I've had of come, I haven't usually asked like, where do you prefer to come? Because typically it is like in my hole. And I'm usually like, no, but I mean, there was like after he came that time, then there was more. And then it was like, I did say at that point, I was like, I can do it. I was like, I'm going to do it. I was like, I'm going to take this one. But instead he wanted to come on my chest.
Yeah.
And I I haven't we haven't talked about it yet today, but part of me does want to ask, like, he said he wanted to come on my chest just because, he had done that previously and that he enjoyed that and that it was kind of like sexy and that I don't think he's done with most of his other partners because usually it's just coming inside. But part of me is going to inquire later of if he didn't want to come in my mouth partially because he was worried it'd make me feel uncomfortable. But I did feel, I was like, I'm ready for it. Like, I can do this. Like, I want to do it now.
So that's awesome. And so where do you, so this is, you don't need to share this, but when you're communicating with a partner, you can be like, you know what's really hot? When you come on my like pinky finger. That turns me on so much. I love that. I want that. The dude's going to be like, yo, pinky's up. Let's go. He's not going to be like,
all about the pinkies.
No, you're going to have, I'm going to have sex. We're going to create sex. You're going to be naked. You're going to be raw. It's going to be awesome. And I'm going to be like, no, I want to come on your thumbs. I'm out. So, but owning.
Totally.
Rather than where do you want to come? Be like, this is like super hot and this is what turns me on. Most people, again, I don't want to speak for everybody, most people are like, oh, I want to, what turns you on? It's what I call this erotic cycle of arousal. If you're turned on and I'm like feeling awesome, I'm turned on and it's this thing. So you tell me the buttons to push, the pinkies to come on, and what you want me to call you,
totally,
and how you want me to spank you or whatever it is. I'm gonna do those things. Why? Because I like you or I love you or I want to have an amazing connection with you and create something fantastic together.
Yeah. And I do think had I been like, I want you to come in my mouth, he would have.
Totally.
I think maybe he did sense this piece too. I was slightly hesitant because it was a different angle and I was laying down this time. And that's usually where like my biggest fear does come in with coming in my mouth, that I'm like, if I'm like laying down or like on my side slightly, then I'm like literally not going to be able to actually swallow. And then I'm going to like choke and that's not sexy. And then
why not? Why isn't choking sexy?
No, like in the way that I would choke, I'd be like, I'm choking, so I'm going to die. I'm going to run out of the room. Like I'd be like, I'm running out of the room because I'm like terrified. But I think perhaps he sensed hesitation there just because it was a different angle. And like before it was like he was laying down and I was like over him. And so like that felt a lot more confident for me. But I totally agree with you. And I think there have been things in the past that with partners where it's like, this really turns me on. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. And I've never experienced that with my other partners. But like, let's explore it. And like, I want to try to do that and experiment with that. So yeah, I think, and again, even as we discuss all this, it does all so come down to communication.
Yeah. It's all because it's such an interest. And one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with sex, we are our most raw and vulnerable and open. And there's so much that's communicated in the unsaid. And we're so lacking in the words to actually say what's there for us that when things come up, when there's uncomfortableness, when there's weirdness, which happens when you're having sex, it just does. I always encourage people to just like own it. It doesn't have to be in the moment. Be like, hey, this is weird, right?
That's what I did.
But like, and you can if you're comfortable and safe. But
and that's the owning it. That's me being like, yeah, this is awkward. I'm laughing. Like, I don't know what to do with it now. And he's like, do you want me to get you a cup? And I'm like, I don't know. Is that weird? Do you get me a cup? And he's like, yeah. Like let me get you a cup, and I'll be right back.
Or it can be checking in the next day and be like, hey, like. What did you really enjoy? Or what was the thing you were least comfortable with? Or let's talk about this. So you start building that sexual repertoire and learning. Because so many people come from like, oh, well, this is what my last partner liked. And this is like the 15 or 5 or 1 or 1,500 people that I had sex with that I'm now thinking, oh, I'm going to connect with Taylor this way and not knowing like, oh, guess what? Taylor, this is new coming to her mouth. This is what she likes. This is what she's not comfortable with. And how about I get curious about what brings her pleasure, what turns her on, what makes her comfortable, and then being able to create something really amazing together rather than coming in being like, I am the best lover and I'm going to rock your world. Because that doesn't work out too often.
I think, honestly, this just reminded me of this post. There's an account called Shrimp Teeth. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they, on Instagram, they do a lot of just like really amazing quotes. And they do talk a lot about non-monogamy, which I super appreciate. But they did a post about emotions, and it said your emotions are valid and they won't scare away the right pals.
Yes.
And that's something like in my last relationship really, really rang true to me, that it was like all of my needs were like this really big, scary thing, and my wants were like unrealistic and all this stuff where I totally think that, especially when you're going through like a new sexual roadmap with someone, that if those things are valid for you, and that if your partner disagrees or perhaps is like scared of them or judges you for them, like that might not be the partner for you. That might not be a partner where you're going to be able to enjoy yourself sexually and be open and be able to explore that, and that the right people will get that.
Yes. So I'm a huge proponent of having those conversations up front.
100%.
Not when you're naked and there's a 200-pound dude on top of you and in you.
Yeah.
Like that's awkward. And you know, there's a shift happening, and I'm super happy for women that it's not only looking at sex as feeling like safe and secure and respected, but pleasure as well.
Yes.
And communication for me is that access to that.
Yes.
And it may be different, it may be weird, but like use the Lita technique. Talk about the things that you like.
Yeah.
Because so many women and so many young women are coming from the place of, oh, I need to please my partner to do this. Oh, I need to access love. I need to do this. Oh, and not really owning the pleasure and the fun and the creativity and honoring themselves inside of this equation. And so talking about it, communicating about it. And again, it's going to weed out the people who can't handle it. And you're like, thanks, we're not a good match. See you later. Or thanks for the coffee, or high five.
Thanks for the free meal.
Right? Rather than being naked and being like, oh, you like that? I don't like that. But I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to pretend it's amazing. I'm going to fake an orgasm, and then I'm going to ghost you.
Use your voice. Use it.
Right? It's so powerful, and it's the access to having great sex.
100%. Oh, this has been so amazing. I want to keep chatting with you
Let's
like
do
all
it.
the time.
Let's just keep going for another 7 hours. We'll do the marathon.
I really could. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up, but obviously would love to have you on the podcast again to continue sharing all this information. But in the meantime, I think it'd be amazing for people to follow you and keep up with the cool things you're doing. If you want to share with people a little bit about where they can find you and what kinds of things you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram, Dr. DeWitt, DRDEWIT. So I'm posting there regularly. My website is drdewit.com. So again, drdewit.com. And, a couple of really cool things that I got going on. One thing that I love doing is I'm doing 2-day VIP intensives with couples and individuals in transforming their sex life. Yeah. So this is specifically designed to have people create and access the sex life that they want and the sex life they deserve. So if there's people out, that are in a relationship and it's sexless, or it's coming to an end because sex is a big issue, like that's what I love doing. So I travel and do that with people, or people fly into Toronto and I do that with people. And so that's something that I'm really excited and passionate about. And also speaking. So speaking at conferences and conventions I'm a performer by nature. Yes. I love being on a big stage. It's super fun. So there's a couple markets that I do. So I speak at universities. Yeah. So around consent and creating healthy boundaries and relationships. I also do on the corporate side of things, talking about healthy workspaces and anti-sexual harassment, dealing with Me Too, diversity and inclusion, and then women's events. Yeah. So women and I get along very well. Yes. And so I love so any kind of female empowerment, entrepreneurship, celebration of women and having their voice and doing that, that's something that I love to do. And so if that resonates with anybody, I'd love to have a conversation. They can reach out to the different venues or avenues, and we can chat.
Yeah, and for people that are interested in all those topics, following you to be able to keep up on when those events are happening, if they want to come and check them out, which I highly recommend. And the topics around consent and even dating post Me Too. I might be calling you back for more episodes.
Well, let's do it,
because those are super important conversations to have.
Yeah. The other thing that's happening right now is I'm partnering with Durex. Yes. So it's called Do It with Durex. So people are like, "Is that your real name, Dr. Do It?" I'm like, "Yep, it's Dutch." So Durex is an awesome partner, and we're creating and talking about real sex, not this stylized, cool, like beautiful, sexy bodies, but, like sex like 99.9% of us have with our bodies and our issues and our concerns, and really normalizing that, talking about communication, talking about safer sex, talking about all those wonderful things. So that's a project that's launching in the next couple of weeks, actually. So I'm excited about that as well.
Love it. Let me know if there's anywhere where I can help. Obviously, being open and transparent about my sex and cum in my mouth.
I may call you. That's awesome. Thank you for being so honest.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing not only like all your expertise and amazing skills and tools for listeners to use, but also for sharing some of your own personal experiences too. I love when people are not only like their professional selves, but also just their normal selves. And I think it helps humanize people working in this kind of field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making it all the way through and keeping your ears, your hearts, and your minds open. It would mean so much to me if you could take a second or two after listening to this episode to leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you're enjoying about the show. I love reading, what your favorite episodes are, where you guys listen, and definitely feel free to share this with a friend. I mean, part of how we break down the stigmas around these topics is by talking about them, right? And sharing them with more people. So definitely share the podcast. And again, really wanting to include all of you in this podcast. So if you have questions or you want to share a thought or an experience, please send in a voice memo to ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I'm really excited to keep having these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.